My name is Oliver Pickard, and I've always dreamed of building my own car, together with my aerospace engineer and rallyist dad, Andrew.
Hello.
I found the perfect project.
This is my Cox GTM.
The remains of one of only 800 made.
And that looks bad, but when you look at it from the inside, it's even worse.
Crashed, fire damaged, rusted, unrestorable. We aren't just modifying, but completely re-engineering. We aren't just bolting on parts, we are making the tools that fabricate the parts to build my dream car. Bespoke, one of one. This is Project Mosquito. Hello!
Hello!
And welcome to the workshop. What are we doing this week, Dad?
Well, we're going to actually be using our new tool, our new bead roller.
Yes, we have, but after like 2 years of people going, you should buy a bead roller in the comments, we've bought a bead roller. And we've never used one before, have we?
No, but I think it'll be a nice learning curve, a good experience.
When was the last time you learnt something?
I learn something every day.
Dad, there are very few things that Dad hasn't done, and bead rolling is one of them.
In fact, I used to be a big head, but I'm perfect now.
It's a funny old thing as well, because last week Dad said to me, you know, the tube work and stuff is all really, really quite simple and straightforward and something that we've done loads of. Yeah. But making these sheet metal monocoque panels is super stressful, isn't it?
It's much more difficult than I ever thought it would be. I thought, yeah, it's fly through that, it's simple, you know, there's nothing to it. But to actually get them just so takes a lot of work and an awful lot of time. I'm amazed how much time it actually takes.
Well, it's not just that. Like, knowing how to do something is very different than doing it.
Yeah.
And obviously we both know how, but it's the doing of it. And when you make this panel, all of a sudden you get this little counter in your head of all the hours that you've put into it. And then you take a grinder to it or a file to it and you think, if I slip now, I have to remake this panel from scratch. And it's taken like 10 hours work. And I'll be here for 2 days if I slip with this grinder. So they're pretty simple to make. It's pretty straightforward and pretty quick. But it's the thing of, if you stuff it up...
Right at the end, it's back to the beginning.
And now we're going to use a bead roller for the very first time. No pressure. Right, let's get cracking. My lovely post lady brought me this bead roller, and she's about 5'2", and she couldn't actually lift the box out of the van. And she pulls up and goes, "Oliver, Andrew, what have you ordered?" Yeah. World's cheapest bead roller. But it'll do.
Super simple. The things I couldn't get hold of are these 2 gears.
Yeah, it's a very cheap, very Chinese bead roller, but it'll do the job. We've got the lathe, so we can make custom dies if we want to make custom dies for bead rolling aluminium and stuff like that. So if you don't know what a bead roller is, we should perhaps explain. It's basically 2 dies. A die is a metal thing or a plastic thing that makes an impression. Yeah? That any sort of die, any time you hear the word die, like a Dimple die. I've got our Dimple die here. This is the oak Dimple die tool that we made. It's now covered in sparrow poo because anything that sits in this workshop more than 20 seconds gets covered in sparrow poo. But, SARS. Right, but this is the oak dimple die tool that we made to dimple die our inner sills, and this is a die in the same way that this is a die. So this die basically goes in a hole and squishes and swages or bends the edges of the hole to make a dimple die, as you'll see in our inner sills. These are rolling dies, hence the term bead roller, and it rolls a bead or a swage in your sheet of metal or your end of your tube. So if you're making tubes for like intake tubes for a turbo system, you get your tube, your aluminium tube, you cut it, and then you roll a bead in the end of the tube so that your silicone hose doesn't blow off. And it's something that like really good quality turbo kits come with as standard. And in racing cars and in old aircraft, you'll see a lot of both dimple dyeing and bead rolling, because it's a way to make really thin steel really strong.
In fact, every modern car is bead rolled.
Yeah, it's stamped.
Stamp.
With one big stamp, and they go, doof, and it stamps out like a whole floor pan. They don't like sit there with a bead roller and make the floor pan, but in the big die that stamps the floor pan, it goes dunk, and you get bead rolled lines because it makes a lightweight floor pan that's loads stiffer. And if your pet hate is people who can't make stuff strong enough, so double the thickness.
Yeah, or add bits on. You know, extra gussets where a gusset isn't really necessary if you'd have just worked it out properly. And then they say it's over-engineered. Well, when in fact it is under-engineered. Because the plain fact is, if you knew what you were doing, you would be able to do it properly without making it super heavy.
We occasionally watch YouTube together, and it's always incredibly entertaining for me because Dad will lunge forward at the screen and go, "That's not engineering, that's blacksmithing." Because the whole point of engineering is to make something as light, strong, and as simple as possible. And if you have to do something in a complicated way, that's all right. But it has to. The reason you're doing it a complicated way has to be because a simple way doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it has to be of benefit.
Because as few components as something has, the better. Because there's less to break. It's like our rear suspension fix using the two tubes.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't, like, some people didn't understand in that video that the whole point of the video wasn't the two tubes. It was the fact that we solved an incredibly difficult problem in a very simple way.
Yeah. And we ended up with a better product at the end of the day.
And that's what engineering is.
Yeah.
After saying what we've just said, Dad and I turned around and realised that we have one of the best examples of bead rolling on the planet hung on our wall. This is a ripple bonnet from a 1950s Citroën 2CV. After the Second World War, France had metal rationing in full effect, and Citroën were given an amount of steel to make all of their cars with. So Citroën wanted to make as many cars for as little steel as possible. And their idea was to use super thin sheets of steel and then corrugate it, basically bead rolling it. And they managed to make the Citroën 2CV, which was so light because of how little steel it used, it was able to be powered by a 9 horsepower engine. They made a van out of that car as well, where the whole back of the van is also corrugated, and they made the Citroën H van, which is like a big box van, which was in production until 1985. That's how well that worked. So what we said about thread pitch?
Right, so the thread pitch is it's a standard 10mm bolt, and that uses a 1.5mm thread pitch. That's the distance between the top of one and the top of the other.
So when you look at a bolt and you see all the little like grooves on a bolt, all the little threads, it's the distance between those threads, yeah?
And it's a standard 10mm bolt, so it uses a 1.5mm pitch. So for every rotation of this bolt, 360 degrees, it puts the rollers 1.5mm closer together.
Right.
So if you ever do a panel and then you strip it down and do something else, and you want to repeat the panel, a good idea would be to actually write down how many rotations,
how many turns,
and then if you want to repeat it later, you can come back to it and you know exactly. So all your panels are always the same.
Cool. There's not much drive into this one, is there?
No.
Should give us a 3mm divot, yeah?
Yep. I'll take it straight off the edge.
Okay. And there we go. As cool as these little bead rolls are, I think we should try some big gratuitous ones.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to make it stiff, let's make it really stiff. There is an issue with that though, and that is as you are winding the metal through these dies, you're basically stretching it in one place. And as you stretch it in one place, it deforms the metal. So as you can see, this piece of metal is now very, very bent. So all of our lovely straight and flat panels are now going to be exceedingly distorted. Oh no, we've run into the bench. This may be an issue, we might have to take this off. Oh no, not backwards. I'm not as good in reverse. That's better. If you look at the difference between that teeny tiny little bead roll and this big chonker.
Up it is.
I like chonker better, or it's a bit wobbly. So, centre console panels first.
Yep.
And they're getting dimple dies. So our plan for a removable heater is to cut the heater. Not cut it out, but if we cut the top here in a line, it allows you to remove this section of the heater off, and then we'll put like a rubber seal in, and then you'd be able to pull the top of the heater out from this side and then remove the bottom of the heater as one piece. It's very unlikely that you're going to be replacing the entire heater ever.
And the thing is, the heater matrix and the motor are on this side. So if we cut it through there, undo the clips, you can just take the top off.
Yeah. So that makes that actually easier to service than it is now. But you have to be able to get in to service it, and should it ever disintegrate for some unknown reason, you'll actually be able to get it out. And like I said, there'll just be like a little rubber seal along here that meets the two edges. So we're going to have to take a little bit out of this centre tunnel now. That's why I didn't bother about this being slightly off last week. So that, like I said, when the heater's separated, you'll be able to take this top section out and then take this off. And then the bottom section will be able to be brought up, tilted back, and then lifted along the length of the angle of the windscreen and removed. I don't mind it being an annoying job. If I'm never going to have to do it, or I'll have to do it in 40 years, it's not really an issue. As I previously said, like, the nature of dimple dyeing and bead rolling is that it bends your panels to all heck. And that's why the heater is such a tight fit. We'll have to make room around the heater because it'll need like a rubber seal all the way around it. You can't just have a metal panel rubbing on plastic like that with the vibration of the car, especially because we've got like firm engine mounts and stuff like that. It would just rub through the plastic and destroy the heater. And so we'll have to have a seal around it, of course, but having it so tight as it is means that it fits, we can mock it all up, and then when everything's bead rolled and all that, once we've got the panels straight again, after they've been bent to heck by the bead rolling and the dimple dyeing, we can then make the room as it needs to be. And it's another way of making everything slightly too big. It just gives us that little bit of wiggle room. If we move it a hair further up, that'll do it then, yeah? Yeah. Last time we did dimple dyeing, we did it on the inner sills, and I got a load of questions, and we don't script these videos and I can't remember what all those questions were, but I'll try and answer as many as I can right now from what's in my head, which isn't much. So, I apologise if your comment isn't, or question isn't answered, just leave your question down below and I'll answer it. I always answer every single comment that I have time to. Anyway, so, but this is for everybody. So, with dimple dyes, the most important thing is that you don't do it anywhere that's a super precise precision place. So someone asked me about why we didn't dimple dye, for example, the suspension mounts or shock mounts and stuff like that, right? Anywhere that has to be super precise within 1 millimeter or less, so our suspension, for example, all of our suspension geometry is correct to within 0.5 millimeter. If you dimple dye a panel, it distorts that panel. And with the amount of holes we have in our suspension mounts, as you can see behind me, every single one of those holes would be a distortion away from what our geometry wants to be. So you're better using slightly thicker stuff and drilling it. That's the first one. So you don't want to dimple dye anything that's precise or anything. It's for gussets and panels, basically, is a dimple die, not for anything that has to have precise geometry. The second thing is you need to be able to get in with your dimple die tool. So no matter what your dimple die tool is, you need to be able to check that you can get in. Sounds like a stupid thing to say, but the more idiot-proof you can make things, the better. We've all worked tired, we've all done stuff tired, and we've all drilled a hole and then realised we can't get our tool in there. And with this, it's definitely a thing. So just make sure that you're not near a fold or something where you can't get your tool in. The next thing is plan it all out first. Don't put one dimple die in and then try and sort it out from there. You want to plan your holes so they are 33 degrees from each other. The same with drilling. When you are drilling for lightness, you want all of your holes, if you've got a panel, you want all of your holes to be 33 degrees apart, right? And then that way you don't lose any strength. If they're not 33 degrees apart, you will lose strength, and you have to bear that in mind with your design. So there is like method to the madness. And again, a dimple die tool will bend panels. So for example, if you have a crease like this, it's really tempting to go, oh, I could just whack a big one in there. But when you tighten your dimple die tool and it bends the swage in it, it will straighten that panel. In fact, if you look at this panel, you can see it has a dish to it. The entire, because every single one of these dimple dies adds dish. The more swage you put into your panel, the stiffer it will be, but the more it will distort. And you don't want to leave no gap between your dimple dies. You don't want the swage touching the swage. You want a gap of flat, normal, unbent metal between each dimple die, because otherwise what it does is it stretches the metal here and weakens it. And we don't want to weaken it, we want to add strength, not take it away. So that's the basics of dimple dies. And there's a bunch of different tools you can use. You can make one out of all like this, you can buy them, you can drill them with a hole saw, or you can buy some that you use in a press, which make their own hole. It doesn't really matter, the methods are the same. And the best thing to do is spend the time and plan it all out first with a compass, a protractor, and a pencil, and basically draw a load of circles in a thing, then make your holes, then make your dimple dies. And that way, because you can't undrill a hole. Very easy to drill a hole, very difficult to undo it. In fact, these panels have a bunch of work in them, as you've seen in the previous video, and it's very easy to stuff them up. And if we stuff them up, there's no fixing them, we have to start again from scratch. So just take your time with it. And an important thing that I forgot is to remember that your dimple die will always end up larger than the hole that you drill. So in this case, it's
86mm hole.
86mm hole saw,
yep.
And it ends up as an 88mm dimple die, yeah? Yep. So you have to make sure that you add that in your circumference to every single one, because it's really easy to get compound errors when you do something like this, which is when you're a little bit off with your first one, then you measure from your first one to your second one. You shouldn't do that. You should start with a datum and then measure from that datum line. A datum line is a constant line which all things are measured from, and you should measure from that line to your first one, and then from that line to your second one, and then that line to your third one, and so on. And that way everything ends up the same, because if you measure to your first one and then you measure your first one to your second one and you're a millimetre out, right, and then you measure from your second one to your third one and on, if you're doing 4 or 5, you'll end up
It'll be 10mm out,
yeah,
easily.
10mm out, and it'll look a right mess. So precision and planning is everything. So we've centre popped every single one of our dimple dies, and now we're going to pilot drill every single hole with a teeny tiny drill bit. And what that allows is a hole always likes to follow a hole, basically. So your teeny tiny pilot hole gives the bigger drill bit on the hole saw some direction, because it's very easy to be slightly off with a very big hole saw, and it becomes very apparent. Woohoo, finally. So it's massively important that you take the time and deburr your holes really, really well. Sometimes you get a bit of a cocked over dimple die that looks a bit wonky, or it has like a little bit of a bent edge, and you end up going back in and... Right, so the camera died, so I'll explain this again. It's all right, don't mind doing it. With the dimple die, it's really important that you deburr all your holes first, because otherwise what happens is you get a little bit of a burr on the inside and it tends to kink your dimple die. And the other thing that I like doing is lubricating the dimple die, for the simple reason that you'll never get your dimple die stuck. I use paraffin wax. This is an old paraffin candle, and I've had it forever. And it really helps, because I never get my dimple die stuck. Because if you get your tool stuck in your steel, it's really easy to bend the dimple die trying to get your tool out, so that's not a good thing. And I've done one already, and as you can see, this is how much it bends your piece of steel. Like, it deforms the heck out of it. It's like a potato chip. So that's why you should never do it on anything that's like suspension-y, or anything that requires any sort of real precision. Worth it, because you're making it lighter and stiffer, and they're really pretty. I love dimple dies. Cars that prominently display dimple dies, the Bizarrini Manta has them on the outside of the sills. The Lamborghini Miura has them on the chassis. The Mosquito's kind of sister car, which is funny because Bizarrini inspired the design of the GTM with the 250LM. For a 250LM is very similar looking, only it's twice the size. In fact, it's probably not twice the size, because Le Mans cars tend to be a lot smaller than they look. And there's some of the old Porsche Spiders as well, some of the old, whatever they are, Spiders. And they have dimple-dyed inner sills, like we do. It's a very GT class thing. A lot of the cars that I love, so cars like the Acer GT, which was built by a little 1300cc thing, 4-cylinder engine built by Ferrari, the Alfa Romeo Tubolare Zagato, a lot of the old 356s and stuff like that, all raced in the same category, in the GT category, hence GTM. Because you didn't have to produce many units. I think it was like 50 units in order for homologation. And so all the cool, really lightweight, kind of smaller engined cars, which this belongs to, were all in the same family. Yeah, it's pressed that bend out look. That's what we were concerned about. Oh well. First things first, you have to give them CPR. Okay, this one's going to need a tap.
Yep.
But that's a lot better than it was. Still a little bit concave, but we can straighten that out. That's it, you've just made it super stiff and hard to bend. Then you have to bend it back. One of the reasons I don't like the ones that press in, that use a... They've got like a beak, a bit like an octopus does, weirdly. But they've got like a two-jawed beak on them. And you put one side on, put the other side on, just like that, and then you clamp them up in a press. And they punch their own hole, and then they dimple dye it. And one of the reasons why I don't like them is because they really bend whatever you're making. And you'll notice that people that use them stick to really small dimple dyes, and when they're done, whatever they're doing, usually a small strip, ends up like a banana. Bend them like mad. You'll be able to tap that back in using the dimple dye now.
Yeah.
Show it in then. See what we mean about putting a dimple dye too close to a fold? By the time you got that fold back in, it's trying to knock the dimple dye out. And it'll tap in, but it'll take work. But if you'd used like an industrial brake, like a big sheet metal folding brake, and that was a really tight line, then you'd end up with all sorts of problems. But we can knock, because it's not the world's tightest fold, we can knock it back in using the die and a tap, as in bang. Bit of percussive adjustment.
That's good.
If this video has just gotten really pretty all of a sudden, it's because we've replaced the camera halfway through the video. Our camera's been ailing for a while and it's finally given up the ghost. So if you are enjoying this video, please remember to like and comment and subscribe and stuff, because your support really it allows us to do things like buy a new camera. Oh, the other thing that I've done, as well as replace the camera, I've taken the whole saw to the boot, because obviously the front of this body no longer weighs very much, but the boot had like a lot of pre-cut fiberglass and stuff in it where it's been repaired, and it's incredibly heavy, and it was actually pulling the body off the back and stopping us lining the body up properly. And you might notice that when the body is on, it now fits quite a bit better than it used to, because we had a bit of downtime in between. We didn't want to make any real progress without a camera and not be able to film it. And then like this video halfway through has a lot of progress, and we're just like, oh, while you were away, we did all of this. So we spent a little bit of time lining up the body and stuff. We haven't really done anything on this, but yeah, I took a lot of weight out the back because it kept pulling the body off. Right, so what we're going to do is bead rolling.
Bead roll. So, front panel first.
Yep. I think, actually, what we can do, you know the one we were going to do, I think we can take it around here. Yeah? And then I think we can come across. At the end of the day, this one will be under the cowl anyway. Yeah. Completely hidden by the body. So the only time anybody will ever see this one's when it's body off. But we'll know it's there, and we'll know it's cool. Just to the middle, or as far as we can go. One of the difficulties I had when I was trying it was that we had the dies the other way up, because that's how the bead roller came, and you couldn't actually see where you were going because the top die is concave. It made it really easy to wobble, so we flipped them round.
Right, ready?
Got it? In a perfect world, we'd have bead rolled this before we would have bent it 2 years ago. But actually, I like this design, it's quite cool. These are super stiff already. I was thinking a perimeter, if we can actually get one in that does like that. But can we get in, right, along, up, bend, up, yeah? So we can get a perimeter from there, all around to there, and the next, yeah? Because it doesn't need one in here, that's a bead roll as it is. It's already a bead roll. It's funny because you're really enjoying yourself, aren't you?
Yeah.
I can tell.
That's nice to learn something new.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen you this like super enthusiastic doing something. It's cool. That's it. So you'll notice we're doing the same rule of thumb that we did with the tube frame with this, where our X is coming to an edge or a radius and not to the middle of a straight bit. It's just, it makes something loads stiffer. I don't know whether the rules of something being in bending apply to a bead roll, but it will be stiffer this way. Because obviously your edges of your panel, where things actually meet up, just happen to coincide with your cross of your bead roll and your radius. So it should make it a little stiffer.
Okay.
Is that it?
A bit more. That's it.
I've got an old oil can in my car in my daily driver, which is a 1963 Citroen 2CV for those of you who don't know. There's a load of videos about it on this channel. And I've got an oil can under my bonnet in a special oil can holder, like a little old-fashioned top-up oil can. And on a warm day or in winter when the car's been running for a while, it expands and it goes bink. And it took me ages to figure out what this noise was. Because every now, I thought there was a dint in the floor. And it's because it doesn't have a bead roll in it like a jerry can would.
Super strong now.
And Dad's just been saying that we should have done this in two, yeah?
Yeah. So what we should have done is, instead of going all the way through it, we should have come up to it, stopped, and then started again after this one. Because what we tried to do is stretch it in 2 directions. If you'd have been a stamp panel, where you had a big stamp that had an X in it, you could have done it because it would have been able to stretch it in all directions at the same time, but because we've done it in 2 separate occasions.
But we might be able to tidy it up with...
yeah, a little planishing hammer, we can just...
Give it a little bit of a tap.
But yeah, because we've already got this bead roll in here that we did ages ago, now this is one super stiff panel.
I lined that up well.
Yep.
Yep, I like the humility in that. No self-confidence there. Well, with the heater in, it looks superb for a half-finished thing. I'm really, really happy. It's funny, isn't it? I'm looking at it like this. You'll never, when it's a car, you'll never see like the dimpled eyes in the center console from the outside of the car. But it looks fantastic. I'm really happy with it. And like I said, it is half-finished because nothing's welded together. All these flanges need to come off. But we've got a bit of a tricky situation at the moment because everything wants to come on together. We still need to be able to get into the center console to do things like locate the shifter, locate the handbrake. And so this needs to be, this cowl slash front bulkhead needs to be a removable unit for the moment. But it's coming along beautifully. And you can't have a space frame. Like a lot of people thought that this was just a tube chassis, and I understand why, because there is a lot of like weird exoskeleton car tube frame chassis things on YouTube, most of which I'm not a big fan of. And you can't have a proper space frame chassis. Exoskeletons are rubbish. Exoskeleton cars, don't even bother, right? Really good space frames are superb, but tube frames in themselves are terrible for aerodynamics, and there's no point building a fast car and then giving it absolutely abhorrent aerodynamics. Just look at road bicycles. Like road bicycles have basically like 8 tubes to them. It's nothing. It's a diamond shape with a seat tube, and yet bike companies have spent a fortune in wind tunnel testing, making sure that the forks become a nice big blade and that the fork is nowhere near the front tire and stuff like that, because a bicycle frame is naturally terrible for aerodynamics. I love steel bikes, but still, it's the truth. And a chassis is even worse because you've got loads of tubes, and anywhere that air can get stuck, like around here and stuff, is just terrible. So I would never build an exoskeleton car. Space frames are superb, but you need space. And one of the big sacrifices with a space frame is interior room. You know, just look at a Lamborghini Countach. Like a Lamborghini Countach is a massive car, like physically big car. But the inside of it is teeny tiny. We don't have any inside to give up. So we couldn't really do a space frame, and I didn't want massive sills. So this space cock design, whatever you want to call it, semi-monocoque with an integrated tube frame is probably the better way of saying it, is the best way to do it. And it's all of these panels that make this chassis strong. This chassis, as it is pretty strong, but it's not strong in a way that I would be satisfied with because it's not a fully triangulated space frame. And the thing that triangulates all of the tubes in this car are these panels, are things like the firewall all going in, because it will all weld together and make a tub inside a tube frame. And so I'm super, super happy. And the lighter and stronger we can make it, the better. Your car jacks fell over. There you go. Hang it. Well, Dad, we did it.
Yep, we finally got our bead roller and our dimple dies, and they're actually in place.
And a new camera.
And the new camera.
It's been all go this week.
Yeah, it's been a bit like Christmas.
What, really, really expensive?
Really expensive.
But I passed the bead rolling off to Dad because these panels are very difficult because they've all been pre-bent. If you're doing this at home, bead roll first, then bend. It will make your life so much easier. Yeah. And these panels are panels that we'd spent ages making.
Yeah, and it would have been terrible if we'd have messed them up because they've been sat upstairs in a box for quite longer than I care to remember. Not seen the light of day for a while.
Oh, this panel we made 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I looked it up the other day. I thought it was the first panel we'd ever made. It wasn't. That was the inner sill panels. But yeah, it's like episode 5 or something. And last thing that you want to do is stuff something up after 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be tragic. But I'm glad you didn't do that.
So am I.
And I learned to bead roll properly and stuff when we do other panels, and I can do them before we bend them.
Yeah, because there's floors to do, with these side panels here to do, there's tons more.
And firewall, all sorts. Because we've got 2 firewalls.
Yep.
We've had quite a lot of questions about that. The firewall is going to be a dual thickness firewall. It's going to have an inner firewall, insulation, and then an outer firewall. It's the same way that a lot of mid-engine cars have been made over the years, because there's a lot of heat back there, isn't there?
And a lot of noise. It's a way to cut down both.
And it's also safer because in the event of an incident, you've got two layers to break rather than something coming through one solid layer. But all that's going to be bead rolled and all that in it. Yep. So yeah, you've got all that to look forward to. And by the time we've finished, we'll be good at it. By the time we've finished it, we're not going to be doing it for ages. We'll be well good.
It's like plastering a house. Yeah. You know, they're plastering for years, and you just get into it, get all your rooms done, and they're all perfect, and then it's another 20 years before you do it again.
So, if you want to see us get good at bead rolling, please make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel, because we make a new video every single week. And make sure that you like this video because it really helps us make these videos. It's a completely free thing to do that you can do that shows your support.
Yep. And don't forget to leave us a comment.
Yeah, tell us what you think.
You like our new attained skills?
Yeah, it's we'll get better, we promise. So thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.